Well, hello, I'm Dr. Chris Lemmon, and welcome to Wizards Catch Q&A. So it's Wizardscache, Wizards Catch. And this is a format or a playlist that I use to answer questions from friends, students, and who knows, assortment of people that actually email me or manage to find me some way, shape, or form and ask me a question. So the question I'm looking at today is people said to me, I got a question saying, why do I teach in beginning classes a structure of being able to, first off, today, we've changed the names many times, but now today, the first thing we look at is body sensations and how energy moves in your body. So we call that energy essentials. And then we have an energy utility we used to call healing. We changed that name just because the focus of healing seems to be alterations, and now I'm not necessarily finding value. So I changed it to utility or value. And the last one is essential communications and the nature of it. So what I've discovered is that people really weren't interested in a philosophy or a framework or the idea or the way I thought. I would talk, philosophize, or pitch things, and they'd say, what do we need to do? I actually started out way back working with children and being like, how could we improve their grades? How could we improve our relationship with our children? So I did a lot of parenting conferences. Myself and another lady would work together. She had been in the teaching field for a long time. And so we would pull out those tools, and people didn't really care why or what the philosophy was. They just wanted to know what to do. And typically they would do it most would do it for a very short time, a couple months, and that's about it. So what I learned from years of doing that is you needed to teach really simple techniques that was easy for people to do, and you'd have to then pitch them more on why to do it and to continue doing it long enough to change their habit of life. It's like, for how long did dentists give away toothbrush? I still go to the dentist and get a free toothbrush and toothpaste, for heaven's sakes. It's like they're still pitched that stuff because they want you to develop the habit of brushing your teeth. Tooth decay used to be huge on this planet, and a big killer, one of the top three killers. So they've done a really good job of forcing people to brush their teeth, to change the habit of doing things. So really teaching for me was getting people to develop better habit styles so they could have a healthier lifestyle, and they could get a little bit of an idea of being able to pursue their vision and dreams and why that doesn't work or does work for them. So that was the whole idea. So let's talk a little bit about the framework, which this is going to be a short overview. I've got some longer ones that'll come along that'll probably be in parts, but let me give you a quick overview. I think that what happens with our brain, right? We're born and this whole thing is assembled into the world of form. The world of form, logical world, is all structure. The air we breathe is structure. We can look at it under a magnifying glass. It's all structure. Even the empty space has got structure in it. Albert Einstein, relativity, right? Space-time, continuum, got it? It's all structure. So here we are, whatever we are, I don't care what you think you are. That's all fine and good. I'm not arguing with what you think you are. Pretty much you came into creation. I'm not talking about the biological piece. That's simple. But the fact that you started to come into form and were taken an idea, a concept that somebody had, and brought into a structure or a form. And so that's starting to make some changes. You developed in this process his brain up, this gray matter, right? I really looked at that gray matter as its main function in your life was to keep you alive. That's what it's designed, I think, to do, to keep you alive. It processes all the data, all the input, and it figures out what to do. It has to keep your metabolic rate up. It has to figure the right amount of glucose to put in your blood, whether you're going to need energy or not. All of that is just simply to support life. Otherwise, it would just be random probability, and there was be somewhere around a 50% death rate. We're not that bad. Well, most of the time we're not that bad. So I think this thing's meant to give you life. I also think that when I looked at stimulus response, because I've been teaching for years, people don't get it fast enough in stimulus response. So the brain has to be predicting. So the way I look at it, really, the framework's this. The brain predicts what's going to happen at some future moment, timepiece, right? Now, you got to remember that the difference between the five senses is not the data, it's timing. The five senses give information, the same information to you with a different time signature. Smell, taste, sight, depth. Sight being the fastest refresh rate, comes in data fast, smell being the slowest. So it has a time, it builds dimension. The five senses build dimension. It gives you information. That's what it's designed to do. So the brain makes a wild guess and expects to be wrong. And it starts to set up your metabolism for its guess. And then as data comes in, it adjusts. So that's why we're highly influenced. We are easily influenced because we have to be influenced to stay alive. Right? It's making a guess and it has no idea. Now there's a really cool automated system that comes into there. That is inductive reasoning. Psychologists call it, people commonly call it intuition. It's just basically a database. The database is not pictures and so on and so forth. We get that idea from images. Basically, it's just patterns, right? Everything on a planet has form, and a piece of form we look at and see, and we put a title on that form. So language is a title to some structure or form. So we call that a symbol. When we call that a symbol, we're not talking about a picture. We're talking about the complete piece of information that flows from that. For us, it would be in five senses, but it's all the information about that piece. Then we put a shortcut on it rather than saying, well, that thing over there, that's blue, green, blah, 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 and tell a story about it. No, we just say, there's a tree, right? So we just put a word, it's a shortcut. So we build language around that, right? When we first come into form in life, books tell us, learning tells us, my experience tells us that we kind of think we're the world. It's kind of like we just were imagined. We imagine wherever we were in the dark. Our brain's always in the dark, but we were in the dark also, and a kind of a fluid, warm environment that was being fed was really nice. So all of that component comes into place. So we just think that's going to continue forever, right? And all of a sudden we come into a harsh piece of world. It's much colder. Its temperature varies. We get handled sometimes gently, sometimes not so gently, sometimes dropped on the floor. All those things happen. So we start to realize it's like, wow. And we start to determine that maybe we're not just this world. Maybe there's other components in this. Because before it was just all up here. It was all what we were fabricating. And now it's not that way. So we start to recognize. So we can tell when we reach up and bite our toe as a baby. I'm not sure I could do it today, but as a baby I did. But most certainly we can say, oh, there's a feeling, there's a sensation there. When other people walk in a room, we feel them too. There's also a sensation, right? We feel everything. So we need to narrow down to what is us and what is not us, right? So mom then pretty soon is not us. That all of a sudden is something that shows up on a demand when we scream. But most of us certainly is somebody totally different that will come when we scream sometimes and sometimes not. And sometimes of service and sometimes not so much of service. So we learn all those things. And so we start to build that framework and we build that database. And then the database becomes very, very useful because there's a rule of conservation, right? We have to keep energy in the system. It really conserves, especially when it comes to fuel. And so most certainly we don't burn any energy unless we have to. So if we can look in a database and find something similar, we make an assumption, oh, well, that's like. So we go through life saying, well, that's like, well, that's like, well, that's like, but no two things are really the same. So it's just very similar, but it's a shortcut. It conserves energy. So starting out in life, we have a sense of, we feel things, we can feel things, we can actually feel an awful lot. We've narrowed it down to feeling. And now today, when you test adults in the world, we find that we have total numb spots in our body where they can put little acupuncture pins into different places in your body and you don't even feel them. So we really have deleted feeling. And that was probably a wise thing to secure into, which when I say secure into, I mean it's a reference point, right? If you look on a map and you say, well, I want to go to Chicago. Well, I think the first thing you have to do is figure out where you are now so you know which way to go, right? Because for me, Chicago's east, but if I just go due east, I got to go east and yeah, anyway, it's not necessarily on a straight line, right? So you really have to have more information. It's all really about the information input. So the first thing we secure into is finding our location. Where am I right now? I'm in this place I can feel. I have this tactile sense I can feel. So the first thing I want to secure into is not my story, because we make up stories with language to package things up so that we can be complete with this mind. It's like, okay, here's the package. This is the way it looks. And we fabricate a lot of it. A lot of it's assumptions. You know, it's like, well, I thought it was that way. You hear people all the time. Oh, I thought it was on the left. It's on the right. It's on the left, whatever. Accident reports. Oh my gosh. Getting eyewitnesses. They're basically the whole legal system. They're pretty much all primed, really. But, you know, they make it look like they're not. But they pretty much, I did some of that work. They're pretty much all primed. They're all set up to drop that part of your story because it's not congruent with everyone else's, you know. And they trade everybody prepared together. Scary. Okay. But we do that. We do in our conversation. We do that in our social environment. We sit there and talk about a trip and we go, oh, that happened. Oh, that I didn't know that happened. Oh, I didn't notice that. And then we enrich our stories. Our stories are a way to process externally in the world that put us out in the world. You got to figure that as a baby, you're imagining whatever. This thing is going off, creating all kinds of possibilities. You have to then decide of all those possibilities, you have to put you in it. You got to be in it because from these eyes, you don't see you. So you got to really make you up in all the scenarios. The stories are ways to put you into the scenarios and confirm it. If I tell a story about my recent camping trip, I have friends that were there. So we can all say, yeah, it was real. Otherwise, was it real? I don't know. All right. If they all say it wasn't real, it would be grounds for a discussion, right? It's like, wow, okay. I think I saved a receipt when I paid for the camping space. Anyway, you see, it's evidence-based. You get this? We try to secure into structure with receipts, with data, with out here in the world, outside. But inside, the only thing we secure into is how it feels, right? How it feels. And we have to separate how it feels from our story about, oh, I don't feel blah, 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 whatever, right? Or I feel like I'm special. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm glad you're special. I'm sure your mother even liked you a little. All those things are probably true, right? Do you understand this? So when I started teaching, I said, okay, first thing we have to do is recognize, wow, we have to recognize that this thing has energy in it, moving. It has chemicals in it. It has hormones in it. It has all kinds of stuff going in it all the time. We really don't want to mess with that. That's all keeping you balanced so you can sit erect, so you can talk to people so the first thing we want to do is have something for we call it ground, secure into. I want to connect to the planet. Have you noticed that most of the humans are walking around on the planet? I know now and then there's a few up there in satellites, but most all of us are walking around on this planet. And that's a good news because it puts us all in the same general time relationship on space time. So there's a lot of advantage to that. So the first thing to do is to kind of connect to the planet and ground in the planet and and when you do that and you feel grounded and secure, your feelings become pretty viable. If you're floating around somewhere, feelings are really different, right? You listen to the astronauts talking, you've probably seen films of them, zero gravity. All right. So most certainly as we start to ground, we start to feel that, we start to have a better relationship with our body. It's easier for us to find us Therefore, it's easier for us to create whatever's going to happen. This thing's predicting what's going to happen. It needs data and feedback so it can set your metabolic rate at the correct level to keep you alive through the experience. If you make assumptions that this walk in the woods is going to be like yesterday's and the bear chases you, it's like there's not only a surprise, but it takes a certain amount of time to have you switch to a different metabolic rate. Might make the difference. That's why we practice and repair. We practice and rehearse over and over again. We have to do crisis management and things like that so that we can expedite that time that it takes to move our attention to a crisis or deal with something that's a big change that wasn't anticipated. Nothing ever works perfect, right? The whole system's not perfect because it's making it up. It's creating it. It's literally making it up. And as the pieces all flow together, it's getting data in, but the data needs to be about you. So first step is getting grounded, feel that body, say, yeah, I'm here. I got it. I can do this. I can feel this. Boy, something just bumped me. I felt that. Wow, that's pretty good. In class, we push each other around a little bit so you can feel that, get a sensation of it. The second thing we start to look at is like, how do I make this report that I'm having come in about me all the time? If life is, I'm not talking about narcissism. I'm not talking about having a story that's all about you. I'm talking about having an experience called life that has you in it. So therefore, you're always talking with the context of I'm in this. Come on, we get in a group and we're all having coffee and we're talking and somebody shares a story and someone adds a story and someone adds a story. It's like we're all taking turns. We're all talking about, oh, I had an experience like that. Oh, I had an experience like that. Oh, I had an experience. So we're validating the experience. We're expanding the range. That's good news. And we're all injecting the fact that I am unique. We're getting this piece of I, so that we have a sense of what I call value in this world. I can do this. That's important, right? I can do this. If I can't do this, I got to get someone else to do it, right? That'll cost me money. Or maybe I got to make a friend in order to make it all happen. You get this? So really, really important to get the nature of like, wow, I need to be in there. If information is coming to you is all about you, then it's adequate to make adjustments in the brain's prediction to all of a sudden have you healthy right now in the moment with the right metabolic rate, exactly where it should be, and that has value. Let me give you a story, right? For example, say you're a kid and you're walking along and you're looking over and you're preschooler and you see these people playing ball and not too sure what's going on, but you're just standing on the sidelines and you see them playing and all of a sudden someone hits a ball and you're just kind of watching it. And there for a second, you kind of daydream out, which we do every couple of seconds or every couple of minutes. We actually dream at night. We actually dream in the daytime too. So all of a sudden you lose attention to what you're doing. And next thing you know, the ball hits you and you knocks you over. Best case scenario, you kind of wake up and realize, oh, I was watching a ball game. That comes together fast. You reach over and grab the ball and throw the ball, more or less, back into the playing ground so that people can get it that are playing ball. That engages you, and that becomes what we call a learning experience. But if all of a sudden you get hit and you drop down, you could be laying on the ground and you could be suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome because you just got hit by something and you missed the link. You missed a piece. You can't go back and make a story. I was just looking out and something hit me. I don't know what it was. You can't make a story that fills the gap in. So you might have to have, maybe you need to have a conversation with them. All kinds of things can evolve from that because the brain wasn't getting the data to make a proper, if it was getting enough data, heaven's sakes, you would have got all the way to the ball. It wouldn't have got hit, or you would have tried to block it. You would have done something, right? Is this real? I had a lady come to see me. I was sitting with a friend of mine named Michael, and she told us a story. She said her brother was somewhere in his teens, 13, 14 years old. And he was sitting on a bench. They were all playing ball. And he's sitting on a bench and they were watching a game, right? So he's one of the engaged players, I'm assuming. And they're all playing. And he's sitting there and he's watching the batter, of course. Baseball moves kind of slow. He's watching the batter, getting ready. And then he goes and drifts out somewhere, daydreams. Next thing you know, ball gets hit by the batter. It's a pop up. It comes towards the bleachers. He's sitting there. A couple of people said, eyes up, but he's not eyes up. He's la la land somewhere, and he gets smacked with a ball, knocks him down. Uh, he's unconscious. They call emergency. They take him to the hospital. His sister takes him to the hospital. They get him in a car. He takes him down there. They treat him in hospital. He's catatonic. So for the next 6 years, he's in a wheelchair, sits there in a wheelchair with his head slumped, looks out straight, doesn't talk. They have to feed him. He's in a facility. They have to feed him. They have to wash him, clean him, take care of him. His sister is a sweetheart. She goes by and sees him once a week, pushes him in a wheelchair through the gardens outside, talks to him and everything, but he don't respond. He just sits there and stares out. So she came to find some help. So we went to see him. So we literally went to the park. Michael sat on a bench. I stood behind. We were just talking, and she came pushing the guy out in a wheelchair. He's kind of at right angles to Michael, same level, because Michael was sitting, he's in a wheelchair, and I'm standing behind. And with the guy just sitting there staring, you figure he's looking at something, right? That's not a big, brilliant thing. So we kind of get a feel for what's going on. And it's kind of like he's almost frozen in fear. That's the sense that we got. So we're just getting a feel for what's going on with him. She sits down next to Michael, and Michael's looking. And when Michael gets in the image about the same time I did, of kind of looked like a really big guy standing in front of him. And Michael even said, that's a really big guy. And his kid, who'd been 6 years in his wheelchair, frozen, turns his head to Michael and said, and he's got a stick too. Within 2 weeks, the guy was out of the hospital. Right? That's all he did. He was watching a guy with a stick. Come on, it's baseball. He's got a bat. And then he tranced out and went into some vision. I don't know. We can make up a story about it. Maybe it was a past life where he was being attacked by somebody at the club or any silliness like that. Doesn't make that illegitimate. It just means it's not secured. What was secured is that he was catatonic for 6 years. And as soon as he could start a conversation about this picture that he was frozen on, this image that he was stuck and he couldn't get away from because it attacked him. It hit him, knocked him out. So it was paramount. The brain didn't have a prediction for it. You guys, if you're not paying attention and you're not thinking about you, I'm here doing this. I'm not saying discount your friends. It could be a we, but you're included in the we. You get this? Really important. Otherwise, the brain gets all this data and it doesn't use it because there's no you in it. So the metabolic rate's wrong. So this, I don't remember his name anymore. It's been so many years ago. And I've done so many cases like that. It's very, very common. We lose that sense of self. As soon as he found him again, it was no longer a guy with a stick, the batter. It's no longer a guy with a stick out there attacking him. It's simply now, I was watching baseball and I got hit and I got knocked out. And I was in a hospital for 6 years. Can you imagine? That's what been his story afterwards. You get this? This is really very simple. So there's value in him being him. There was no value in him being frozen, totally catatonic, couldn't function, couldn't lift his hands, couldn't do anything, couldn't even put his hands up to block the ball. He couldn't have done any of that. So it's very, very interesting. So this is how we operate. So we have to find some value in life. Value is you. I participate, you. All the data comes in and the brain has to decide what's relevant to you and then take that and adjust its prediction so it has you in a healthy mode. If you're not healthy, you're probably giving it a lot of data, not about you. You Are you eating food that someone else is giving you? Right? You go to the burger place. Do you have any relationship with the people that make the burger? Or do you show up anywhere other than at the register when you pay? So how's it going to get data? How's it going to get any type of information about the experience in total? Right? Do you get this? So the second one is about utility. It has to have value, which really means you have to be in it. You have to be present in it. You have to be involved in it in some way, shape, or form. And the third one is you really have to pay attention to all this data and communication. You can easily trance out and think you're part of a group. We see that today so much because of the fact that we're so polarized. Polarized means that we're no longer us, and we're this group over here. We don't have an independent thought. We now have a group thought, right? Racism, all that stuff is really the same thing. It's a polarized piece. We're not seeing a person, we're seeing an enemy. Technically speaking, in a range of possibility, a view that you see, just when you look out without moving your head, a view that you see is range. And you're sitting there, and of course, you're viewing it. So you're viewing it in the middle, always, right? Even if it's a building, you've still got the building to the right and the view off the building to the left. You've still got a range. But if all of a sudden you take a pole, you take a bias, you secure into, I'm going to see it from one viewpoint, you have to then back up against the wall. Literally, if I see a view with a building, I could put my back against the building and just see the view, or I could turn around to the view and just look at the side of the building. But both of those views are polarized. Looking at the building means I am now influenced. I'd have to say, wow, there was a building there. I have gone for walks in the woods already and walked down a trail. And then other times, why I've gone with some friends and they've decided to explore, and we kind of went off trail, right? It wasn't the forest, but it was other areas. We went off trail a little bit and we found building structures, all kinds of weird stuff that I never noticed just walking down the trail because it wasn't visible. The range opened up a little more. Also, I've noticed after fires, I've gone on hikes after big fires in the forest. It's like, oh my gosh, there's rock formations and there's caves and all kinds of things that were there all along. I've been there before and I never saw them before. So our view gets polarized by something blocking it or by us blocking it, by maneuvering it or getting a bias so we don't see the other part of it. We draw a line and block it out. So we need to open up to that communication. We need to be able to ask. It's like if I'm looking and I say, why don't I see the sunrise? Well, then maybe I have to recognize what direction am I looking? If I'm looking to the north, it might be hard to see the sunrise, right? I mean, that sounds really silly, but I've actually had that experience. I figured out which way was south, more or less. But I had people with me that were standing there saying, when's the sun going to rise? And I'm sitting there watching it just start to edge up a little bit over there on that east side. I'm thinking, wow, there it's so. I can see the sunlight coming, starting up. The southeast, right there it is. And he's behind me, a group of people, and he said, hey, Chris, when's this thing going to start showing up? That fool, turn around. You're looking the wrong way. So understand it. He was polarized because he didn't know north, south, east, west. That's not a big deal. He just he didn't have a reference in his body. He wasn't receiving the data. Wasn't getting a feeling for it. I'm fairly good at it. I go hiking with other people that are amazing at it. I mean, I've got a friend that's just like really good at directions. I've been lost with him many times, and it's like I get totally lost. I'm just got to stop and figure out which way is which. But when I'm with him, I said, hey, which way do we go? I totally trust him. He's like, we go this way. It's like he's right on top of it. He's really good. So we all have different levels of skill set. Spending more time with him has improved my sense. My sense is not bad, but it's improved a little bit. I watch him and I'm going, wow, how does he track? How does he do that? That's very interesting. It's good. All right. So that communication is essential. These are the things that you need. The framework that sits there is not really very important. I don't care if you agree. If you want more scientific information, yes, it's a Chris Lemmon thing. The brain makes predictions and everything else is just adjustment. But there's lots of science behind it. And there are a lot of books. But here's one's called How Emotions Are Made, and it's by Lisa Feldman Barrett, neuroscience, 20 years of research. Yeah. And she thinks that it's all prediction. So if you want more data on that piece of it, most certainly read the book. And there's quite a few more. And as a matter of fact, within the context, you'll see lots of references she makes to other writers that are writing along the same thing. So that's where all of my ideas for the foundation of classes came from. We put those pieces together so that we could give people some essential basic tools. They went out in the world and they just utilized those tools. They don't need another philosophy. They don't need another story. I wasn't interested in giving a story. I did a lot of seminars that were weekend seminars. Would be 2 or 3 days. We would take techniques and protocols that would come, most of them from psychology, and we'd actually play with them a little bit and kind of use our tools. We do experiments that came from psychology research, and we'd use our tools to feel our way through it and make sense out of what was going on. There's a lot of noise in our human system. Noise means it's stuff going on, distractions that are not relevant. It used to be that they thought noise was around 10%, something like that. That was acceptable. We'd always allow 10% for noise when I was in electronics. But now today, when we start to look at research with people, we find that it's probably more realistic to say about 40% of noise. Maybe more, depends on their personal discipline. 40% for someone like an insurance adjuster or a judge, it's 40% variance in noise. That means decisions they make are 40% variance, but for insurance adjusters, and you can get a 40% variance for how much they're going to pay on a claim. That's sizable, huge, right? I think for the average person making decisions like what am I going to have for lunch, you probably have 60 or 70% noise. And if they've got a database built up that they like cheesecake, well, they may have cheesecake every day for lunch until their blood sugar reaches a point where they can't function anymore. You start to see that their brain doesn't necessarily know really what to do with that. How does the brain tell you, don't eat cheesecake, you fool? It's like, I have a hard time. You're going to get insulin resistant here pretty quick. Cheesecake's not as bad as some things because it has an oil level. But just sugar and candy is amazing, right? So I'm not trying to pitch off into wellness. I'm trying to just give you some examples of where we can get lost and we don't get good information. Our brain does an amazing job of keeping us alive if it gets good information. There's another whole scenario that comes in, and that's pattern responses. That's another whole talk I can get into a little bit. And we can see that the patterns play off of the intuition or the inductive reasoning as a sequence of patterns, and they can really get us to numb down. Why I'm just mentioning it is because we know that in the 80s somewhere, we all started getting dumber on the planet. Maybe not you personally. Maybe even not me personally. Maybe me also. But nonetheless, we all started dumbing down a little bit because of the technology. We didn't have to think anymore, right? This is like, I'm building something and going to measure the roof per square. I got to go look it up on the computer. I'm doing some type of repair. I'm fixing a taillight in my car. And before it was just trial and error. I'd take it apart and figure out how to get in there. Now I can go look it up on the computer. So it doesn't allow me to think as much. So I think that we started dumbing down. And I think most certainly the technology is useful, but has not made us smarter. it's actually made us less of a resource. And there's some great videos out there asking people questions. They've got an education and they really don't know very much. So they have not been in the picture. It's not about them. If I tear something apart, I can tell you how to do it next time. If I look up directions and tear something apart, I, I like to cook something different most every day. I have to keep my recipes in the computer because I have a lot of them. There's 365 days in a year. I got maybe 400 recipes. Uh, so I really have to look them up. I used to be able to remember bunches of recipes, but now I got really bunches of recipes and I have to go out to my computer and bring it up and look at it and say, oh yeah, that's what goes in it. That's what goes in it. Do I have that? I am putting a list together so I can make it. This makes sense. I have to be in it some way, shape, or form. Data comes in so I can decide whether it's going to, what it's going to, the information has to be in there for the brain to make the right assessment, to keep all this automated system here running. Maybe Google takes care of your computer, but you have to take care of this device, right? You get this? It's really important. So that's what the classes were about. We'll do some more of this. So any questions you have, most certainly get to me on email. That's Chris with 2 S's, CHRISS, at wizardscatch.com, WIZARDSCACHE, and ask me a question. And this is the Wizards Catch channel on YouTube is where this is at that you're looking at. And so you can go to that Wizards Catch channel and you can find all kinds of silly little videos like this that I put on there. And so maybe it'll inspire questions and more of this material to come. So thank you very much. Hey, this has been fun, I think.